time that we make a change, and we hope that this panel today can start the discussion. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Ken Shropshire. Ken is CEO of ASU's Global Sport Institute, where diverse disciplines come together to thoughtfully examine critical issues impacting sport. The Institute bridges the gap between academic research and real-life implications. Prior to ASU, Ken closed out a 30-year career as an endowed full professor at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, where he was also director of the Wharton Sports Business Initiative, professor of Africana Studies, and academic director of Wharton's sports-focused executive education programs. Ken earned an undergraduate degree in economics from Stanford University and a law degree from Columbia University. Thank you for being with us today, Ken. And now on to our amazing and distinguished panelists. First up is an individual I'm sure many of you are familiar with, Arizona State University Athletic Director Ray Anderson. Ray joined ASU as Vice President for University Athletics and Athletic Director in 2014 and has quickly redefined the collegiate athletics landscape over the course of his tenure at ASU. Prior to ASU, Ray was Executive Vice President of Football Operations for the NFL, where he spent 8 years of his career. He also served as Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer of the Atlanta Falcons after his time as an agent for Octagon and as founder of President of AR Sports. Ray earned a BA in Political Science from Stanford, where he was a 3-year football letterman and 2-year baseball letterman. He also earned a Juris Doctorate from Harvard Law School. Next, we have Tyrone Brooks, Senior Director, Front Office and Field Staff Diversity Pipeline Program for Major League Baseball. Tyrone has spent 25 years working in the sport of baseball. Currently, he focuses on baseball operations and bringing more women and persons of color into areas of the front office, scouting, and coaching. Tyrone has held this role since 2016 when Commissioner Manfred created the new position to stimulate greater diversity on baseball's administrative levels. Prior to his role with MLB, Tyrone was Director of Baseball Personnel for Pittsburgh Pirates, where he spent 6 years. He also served as a professional scout for the Cleveland Indians after spending 11 years in the Atlanta Braves organization. Tyrone graduated from the University of Maryland with a double major in accounting and marketing. And now I'll pass it off to SBS President Sam Pearson to introduce our final 3 panelists.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Elise, for that awesome introduction. My name is Sam Pearson, and I'm the President of Sports Business Scholars at ASU. I'm very honored to co-host this important event with SBA and introduce the remainder of our panelists today. I'd like to introduce Kate Foley, the Director of Athlete Brand Strategy and Marketing at Octagon. In this role, Kate leads business and branding efforts for more than 25 NBA players and serves as a liaison between her clients and the league, teams, sports, media, and community organizations. Kate has negotiated sponsorship deals for some of the NBA's biggest names, including 2019 MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo, as well as 2015 and 2016 NBA MVP Stephen Curry. In addition, she has served client sponsorship deals with more than 50 Fortune 500 brands, including Coca-Cola, Apple, Under Armour, JBL, and Netflix. Kate is a graduate of Charleston Southern University. Additionally, we have Jerry Gaines. Jerry Gaines is the Director of Global Sports Marketing at StockX. He is an accomplished sports marketing professional with over 12 years of experience helping both agencies and lifestyle brands tell compelling stories through the lens of sports. He is currently the Director of Global Sports Marketing at StockX. Prior to StockX, Jerry started the first ever grassroots marketing team in Michigan for Muscle Milk, worked on some of the world's most exciting events at Red Bull, negotiated and signed partnership deals with iconic collegiate properties like the University of Alabama, Florida State, and Texas. Jerry graduated from Eastern Michigan University with a degree in marketing, where he was a member of the football team. And our final panelist of today is Kim Miller. Kim Miller is currently the Vice President of Programs for RISE, a national nonprofit that educates and empowers the sports community to eliminate racial discrimination, champion social justice, and improve race relations. Kim's efforts to address inequalities began while in college and extended globally through her work with Surge, a nonprofit organization focused on improving access to clean, safe water in developing countries, where she serves on the board. Prior to RISE, Kim was a management consultant for Accenture and an executive recruiter for Target Corporation. Kim graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in social policy, where she was a member of the Division I cross-country running team. Again, I want to thank you all for being in attendance today. I hope you all enjoy this session. I'm now going to hand the reins over to Ken to begin our panel.
All right, Sam, thanks. It's been a long journey since March 11th pandemic beginnings in terms of race issues around the world. And the past couple of days are no exception, really kind of tease up a lot of what we're going to look at today in terms of the horrible shooting of Jacob Blake. Seven shots. 7 shots in any instance is virtually unwarranted. And then we see something we haven't seen before. And Ray, in your tenure with the NFL, I know this never happened. The NFL players at Detroit decided they're not going to practice in protest. And we have the Toronto Raptors in the bubble talking about they may not play against the Celtics, I think on tomorrow, on Thursday. Yep. So there's some monumental things happening, and we got a great panel to talk about what's happening within your organizations, your personal thoughts and otherwise about what's going on. And I too, I just want to take a minute to make sure we commend the Sports Business Students Plus and whoever else is on here for taking the time to focus on these issues. And and I'll say this too: we all, Black, white, whoever, struggle with the right things to do in this moment and how the right things to say. I mean, I think we got to be very careful in condemning people for their initial words on something. And so as we carry through our short time together, just keep that in mind, and we'll try to be as responsive to some of the questions we've gotten in advance overall. But we'll start off with a kind of simple question for everybody. We'll just go around the horn, kind of quick answers from folks. First, just give a little bit more about your organizations. Will be the first part of it. Then second, what is it that your organizations are doing in this moment since our pandemic race-focused moment? What is it that your organizations have done that are unique from what you've done day in and day out before? I mean, I think we're all, in a sense, those of us from the 60s, 70s, we know the first thing a corporation says, we're equal opportunity employers. Don't know what that means, but that's kind of the statement that's always put out there. But Jerry, why don't we start off with you? Tell us about StockX, and then tell us in just general what they do generically, and then what kinds of things have you done in this moment?
Absolutely. So StockX is the first ever stock market of things. And really what we specialize is sneakers and apparel. So sneakerheads, I'm looking at you. And I've been there about 9 months now, and it has been obviously a pretty crazy time to be there. So I think to answer the question, overall, one of the first things that any kind of brand or organization can do is just have an open dialogue. I think this is something that is been very deeply personal to me and deeply personal to so many of us. And frankly, we want to know where, you stand as an organization. And so at StockX, we had a pretty open, honest, and just raw conversation when everything first happened with George Floyd. And it was probably the best conversation I've ever had in a kind of corporate setting. And I remember leaving that conversation and thinking, not only—
And just, Jerry, I don't want to interrupt, but was it I've seen so many of these now. Was it a Zoom, 20 executives staring at each other in boxes? Kind of
it was the whole company, actually.
The whole company.
Go all the way down. And nothing was off limits. When I say nothing was off limits, I mean, everything was on the table, which was pretty powerful. There was a no spin zone. So we hit really hard with these kind of questions. And I remember leaving the conversation feeling not only heard, but having an ally in this fight. And for me, that was a pretty powerful moment and something really unique to me in my kind of corporate life. And obviously you can't stop with conversation. There has to be so much more. And we've done a lot of those other things. But as a base level, I think having that open dialogue is a great way to start the conversation around such a tough issue.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. We will come back. Tyrone, why don't we go to you? Nobody knows what MLB is. Why don't you tell us what MLB does, and then talk about some of the things that MLB has done in this moment.
Yeah, thank you first and foremost for allowing me to have a chance to be here and get a chance to talk. Obviously, we all send our heartfelt, thoughts in terms of Jacob Blake and his family, and we also just can't forget, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, and I think a lot of different people, and myself, think about personal instances where you've been in and maybe involved in a situation. I'm somebody that was around when Rodney King, everything happened with him. So I look back immediately at that type of moment from years ago. Because I can remember for myself getting pulled over for the first time, being a driver in my first year, having a car and having a license. And that was not long right after the whole Rodney King incident. And I just remember that feeling, and it all kind of came back to me just in terms of just thinking about that. But as an organization, we really spent some time just really trying to reflect as a whole. We had a big town hall with a lot of our employees from all over coming together, but also a major part of what we have within the organization. We have what's called business resource groups, BRGs. They represent all different aspects of our employees throughout the entire country and throughout our office. In addition to African Americans, but all different groups throughout. And we really try to sit down and really just put some thoughts together and how we could each help each other, and also just being able to just have that dialogue. One of the things we also, as a diversity and inclusion department, we actually put together a resource that is actually available now for anybody to look at. If you go to our website at mlb.com/social justice, you'll see we put together an entire information that's there for anybody to look at, just to help as a conversation starter, different aspects, just to keep in mind, our people, what's going on in our country, but also just a way just to bring people together and make it easier for getting through those conversations. And also another thing that we looked at as a whole, as a department and as an organization, was how can we also help in terms of the resources that we have in place. We have a diverse business partners program that's been in place for a long time at MLB, over 20 years. And one of the things that we've done to try to help is really try to help those local communities that have been affected by the different riots and looting that took place. So if we can help Black businesses in terms of them trying to repair and rebuild, and also use our skills that we have as an organization. We have a pro bono program we put in place to help in terms of different skill sets that our employees have, whether it's legal, finance, things that we can help on that end. So it was something we wanted to try to find a way to do that, in addition to the top baseball operations decision makers within MLB, amongst the 30 teams. They all came together as a way to donate over $1 million+ with money from both the GMs and also our office, and also the PA Players Association as well, to try to help contribute money to different funds. So it's been something that has truly been a team effort, and how we could try to help and to make a difference on that end.
Yeah, in that regard, I saw, I guess yesterday, maybe it's today, the Brooklyn Nets put up $50 million, pledged $50 million towards efforts. The Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment the other day, $20 million. There's been a lot of that kind of stuff, a lot of monetary moves, and leagues, as you point out, have pledged hundreds of millions of dollars to these different efforts. Ray Anderson, what's Arizona State University up to in this regard? You can tell us a little bit about what you do, maybe just for a minute, in terms of leading the Department of Athletics.
Yeah, well, certainly we appreciate our students from sports business and putting this on yet again. We have 650 student athletes in 26 varsity sports. So that is our charge. And so when this social justice movement began, unfortunately, it didn't begin with George Floyd. It's been going on for decades, but that really brought it to light. And then the other tragic instances that have happened. The instant thing we knew we needed to do, very frankly, was communicate consistently across constituencies, primarily our student athletes, certainly our coaches, other personnel, donors, alums, anybody associated with ASU athletics. We needed to communicate about what we were going to do departmentally to support particularly our student athletes in the voice they wanted to have. And that's been the most important, probably successful thing we've done, is to have constant communication, encouraging our student athletes to have a voice. Just make sure it's informed. You've thought through the unintended consequences of what you want to say. and then you go out there and you are articulate and intelligent in your messaging. And so we have constantly over the course of this last 5.5 months really brought that home. And it's been effective for us. Our student athletes feel they are supported. They know that they have the right and the expectation to speak out, just do so intelligently. The sports part of it has been secondary, very frankly. We want to play, but we also want our folks to understand that this is a movement, a time where they need to have a voice in the matters that we're discussing today, Ken. So it's been a very exhaustive yet inspiring time to see the voices of these young men and women really rising up.
Thanks, Ray. And then Kim, I'll go to you, and then Kate. But Kim, I guess your answer, at least the second part of the question is going to be a little bit different. So I'm going to ask you the question a little bit differently. Which the Ross Initiative in Sports for Equality. So you can tell us what that is, but part of it is your business is to help people talk about these issues and come to solution on. So I'm more, rather than hear that, I'd really like to hear what happened within RISE in order to focuses on this. What did the organization do to talk amongst themselves? But you tell a little bit more about RISE and then what the initial conversations were.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Ken, and the rest of the team for giving me the opportunity to be here today. RISE, we are specifically focused on race and race relations. So it's educating and empowering the sports community. And we think of that pretty broadly, athletes, coaches, sports administrators, but also engaged fans to eliminate racism. So as Ken mentioned, this has been since the forming of our organization, which we're about to get to our 5-year mark here in October. For the last years, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, we've been focused on race. So it's about eliminating racism. It's about improving race relations. And we work from middle school all the way into the pros, working with the NBA, the NFL, but also working with organizations like USA Hockey and the Boys and Girls Clubs. I think, Ken, to your second part of your question, we started looking at, what changed internally. One with the pandemic, we quickly worked to do things virtually, more digital modules. It was already on our strategic plan, but that really escalated. But we also just took time to check in with one another in the ways that I've never seen the organization do before. So I was hearing about this happening at the NBA and other leagues. Part of a discussion, I led something with the Timberwolves and Lynx, and seeing a lot of organizations do that. But what I thought was really important too is that even though we work in this space day in and day out, it's so important to check in with one another on that, very personal level. We had a meditation session, frankly, because if you're doing this work every single day, and of course, from a college standpoint, Ray, of course, it's college sports are nights, it's weekends, and the work that we're doing with NFL teams, with colleges, et cetera, is that as well. So just really pouring yourself into it. It's challenging, it's taxing. Our demand has never been this high. We used to have a lot of people say, hey, we have a program in our collegiate athletes sophomore year when we talk about diversity, can you work with our sophomores? Or we'd love to do something during Black History Month. Those conversations are out the door. People now realize it is everyone at all times. We can't ignore this from a personal standpoint. So we're headquartered in New York, but our team is really, because of the pandemic, spread around a lot of different places. I'm in Minneapolis, and less than a mile from my home that George Floyd was murdered. And just the intensity of trying to still serve in that environment. And as we're seeing unrest happen in cities all across the country, and then of course of what most recently happened, I think it's just important that we look to check in with one another and how we can be still successful in this work, and when it comes to being anti-racist, because that's a lot of our conversations now. It's not, of course, enough to say that I'm not racist. You must be anti-racist as well.
Yeah, you raised that, and Jerry talked about kind of the how cathartic it was to have some conversations, and Tyrone talked about his own reflections on the past, and Ray talked about this has been going on forever. I know in talking to executives and teams and leagues and that sort of thing, my wife told me, you got a little PTSD going. You need to take care of yourself for a moment. So especially for students, I mean, think about it. I mean, it is. I mean, how much have not said enough? You are not alone in terms of how to deal with this, and that we are all dealing with it differently. And if you get too engaged as a professional, you might forget about yourself for a moment. And so I really commendable that Rise took the time as an organization to say, okay, we need to meditate our way through this a little bit and help each other, because we're going to be doing a lot of this kind of work. So Kate, Octagon, you are actively in touch with the bubble and
Yes.
kind of the headquarters of some of this activity now. Why don't you talk some about what Octagon is and does for those few people who don't know, and then talk about some of the things you've done in the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I think for us, Octagon, we're one of the largest sports agencies in the world. We reach across talent and properties and programs that not necessarily aren't just basketball, which I think strengthens us in our ability to create an environment that's safe and communicative for everyone. One of the programs that we've seen come through Octagon and Octagon Sports and Entertainment Network is a program called Safe Spaces for Brave Conversations. And for us to really own that moment internally with our own staff, but also open it up for external conversations, whether that's through brand partners or athletes. We actually had one of our guys from the bubble call in and talk about kind of what's going on live in the bubble in these situations, because I think everyone wants to know how they can get involved and how they can support. But I think at the end of the day, what you're hearing everyone say, and all of the panelists have said before me, is creating a space for conversations to be had is one of the most powerful things that we can do, because it's safe. It allows people to speak freely, but it also allows us to affect change. And you're not only hearing things, but you're listening more than you're hearing. So, from the bubble, I mean, there's a lot going on right now in the bubble. There's a couple games expected today. I think for us with our athletes across the board, whether that's NBA, WNBA, hockey, golf, tennis, our personalities that we encourage everybody to inspire change and not ignite hate. And I think those are powerful messages that we can give them to use amongst their platform, but also for them to internalize. We're seeing a lot of athletes and a lot of celebrities speak out nowadays, and we're seeing them more as humans and people, less as athletes. And that's a powerful shift in the dynamic than we've seen the last couple of years, for them to be able to use their platform and make a difference that they feel they need to make.
Thank you, Kate. Ray, in our racial awareness calendar, Juneteenth came and went during this period too. I mean, it was a whole different, and there was an event in Tulsa too, which is another webinar where that'll going to be discussed. But that all came about, and your athletes, as you said, were deeply engaged and impacted by this. And one in particular came up with the image, the kind of a conversion of the ASU Sun Devil logo with a black fist holding the pitchfork. Caleb Christopher, one of your men's basketball players, did so, and it wasn't in isolation. I want you to talk some about how the athletic department engaged with this athlete and other athletes with the things that they wanted to do in this moment.
Well, certainly, and very frankly, by design, our leadership team at ASU is very diverse. Has been since the day I walked in and started to make sure that was the case. And so all of our student athletes, and certainly our student athletes of color, always have known that they have a place to come and have honest conversation, as Kate talked about, a safe place to have honest conversations. We've had that, and we have that by design. So when this movement first came about, we had many of our students, and certainly a number of our students of color, come to us seeking guidance. And when Caleb came up with the idea of he wanted to do something, and it was the fish with the pitchfork, And then he included all of the names on there of all of our African-American student athletes and wanted to do something. So we helped him really promote and put it out there. So the initial idea was, will we put the symbol in the end zones of our football stadium, so when the planes rode over, they could see it. We said, no, well, instead of that, let's put them on our big video boards. And from Friday night to Sunday night of that weekend, put it in big bold lights and really do some social media promotion of it to get your message and other messages out there. And so just a matter of them knowing we'll give them full support, as long as it, again, is informed, they thought through the unintended consequences, and they want to do it in an intelligent manner. That has been our encouragement to them. So we have a number of things going, most prominently because they know there's a place to come and they will get full support as long as they're doing it in the right way. So it's been effective for us.
Yeah, and what's interesting, again, for the students, if you know, it's like my kids grew up with, you know, only knowing Obama as president, so the uniqueness of having a white president is you know, it's kind of striking to me for them. That's what I saw in my life, and people at ASU may not realize how unique the primary leadership of Sun Devil Athletics is diverse. And not just gender wise, but also in terms of African Americans and other ethnicities. So it is striking to see that, and it's, you know, it's striking too that it's, you know, it's day-to-day business, but there's also this additional openness and accessibility, but still business decisions. No, we will not put it in the end zone. So still determinations, but it also that don't take place at many other institutions, and not a shyness about it. So Tyrone, you've been committed longer than many people in baseball, just by virtue of both formally and informally, of building networks and finding ways to get diverse people in, people of color and women. In the past few years, in terms of this recruitment of these groups to these various positions, and you've got the ominous job. I tell people the toughest job in sports is to be the central person that's trying to bring about diversity. I mean, the power in the franchises is really with individual team owners. So I do want to hear some of the work that you've been able to do and the support that you've gotten with Rob Manfred since his leadership in terms of addressing these issues.
Yeah, definitely when I first came in, it was a situation where, there was a clean slate for us to really come up with a comprehensive program. And a big part of that for us and for myself coming in, and also we have an advisory board of a great group of individuals that are with both clubs and also within our league office, just coming together as a whole. Once the program was created and me coming in as the director of the program, it was something that just getting a chance to get a pulse, talking to different people that are and talking to clubs and getting a sense of what they were doing, surveying that, also getting a chance to see what kind of what was the landscape in terms of opportunities that were taking place for women and persons of color to break into baseball operations, which is a very tough and selective area to get into on that pathway to become a general manager, become assistant GM, scouts, coaches on that side. First thing I kind of looked at was just from my own background, coming in initially into baseball through a diversity-based program, which was the Career Initiative program that was created by the Atlanta Braves by Hank Aaron and Stan Kasten. I already knew from my own experiences how important it was just to, first and foremost, just have an opportunity that was created. And as we looked at what was kind of the landscape at that moment in 2016, we really felt that we had to go about creating some opportunities that would help galvanize and bring our clubs and the whole league together with the opportunity to hopefully create that opportunity, and then from there keep pushing forward to really build a pipeline. Part of that was in creating the Diversity Fellowship Program, which is a full-time opportunity for an individual to come into a baseball operations department. And as I mentioned, that's a tough area sometimes to break into, especially being right there, working closely with your director of baseball operations and your assistant GM and other staff. So we wanted to create an opportunity that was going to open that door. And that first class, we launched that first class in the fall of 17, and then announced that class in the spring of 18. And that class, I can remember when we brought them all in together for an orientation back in the summer of 2018. It was something that, this program is going to be judged by how you all do in this first class. And that was one thing we really tried to stress to all of them. It was 22 fellows that were selected for that particular class, with 18 teams that were scheduled, that were part of it, including 2 clubs that were San Diego and Tampa Bay that took on 2 fellows each. And those 22 fellows that came in, they really poured their hearts into the work that we're doing. And also we tried to provide as much support for that group. 16 of the 22 in that class were hired full-time beyond the fellowship program, which was pretty tremendous in terms of them now getting that start to make their way, hopefully on that pathway for future success into future leadership roles going forward. Our 2020 class, we're in the midst of finalizing that class. Some delay slightly due to the pandemic, but trying to continue moving forward with that program and how we continue to make traction for that. We also looked at, what can we do to help those former players, those that are out there that may be looking to transition into opportunities. And we created a program called the Former Player Internship Program. And that is allowing individuals to make a successful transition from coming off the field into either a front office or scouting or coaching role, and just finding ways to start that process to really make that transition as seamless as possible for that person coming in, and also open the door for potentially for women as well that are coming from really good playing backgrounds, whether professional softball or even with our national team in baseball. And also later in 2018, we were able to launch for the first time an event that my colleague Elizabeth Venn coordinates with, which is called Take the Field, as a way to get more women into areas such as scouting and coaching. In our first year we had that, it was just the start in that process, getting clubs together, really trying to open up the mindset of, there are talented women that are out there that are interested in getting into this side. And we've been able to have this program for 2 years now, in 18 and 19. And so far, we've had over 80 participants in the program, and about half have had some type of post-event experience that's allowed them to kind of continue to start their pathway toward having a full-time career in the game. And some of this has now been able to filter down until we now have 5 women that are in coaching roles, on field roles, as far as dealing with players on that side. And we have this past year, this season, we have 16 women that are actually that are in on-field roles in some capacity, whether in the minor leagues or in the big leagues. And so it's just something that we're continuing to make, that striving to continue to create that pathway for individuals to make their way. And then also now, with as much it's being, with kind of the limitations potentially in terms of getting on campuses as much as we would like to this year with the pandemic, we have a platform that we've created called MLB Select, which is a way to put individuals in front of hiring managers, both on the business and baseball operations side. It's a way to help individuals have a program, actually have a profile they can create. Then at that point, then they have the ability to get in front of club hiring managers at that point, and just trying to find ways that we can continue to stay in front of students, whether at a historical Black college or any other university that's out there, just as a way to make sure we can let them know that the opportunity exists and the game is out there going forward. So it's something that we're just going to keep pushing toward that. Now taking advantage of everything in terms of a virtual format that we have, and continue to keep pushing on that level.
Thanks, Tyrone. And you're reminding me, and I'll open it up to everybody at the end. I want to get through everybody with at least one specific question. But and for students too, think about this. I mean, it's one thing to get people to engage in these issues, with a heart's kind of determination that this is the right thing to do. It's another thing. One thing that we're working on at the Global Sport Institute is to develop the business case for diversity and inclusion in sports for those who don't see the heart part, that need the business justification. And there's a lot of work out there, McKinsey and people like that do it on just generically. The stock market tends to go up the day after you announce a program or diversity of ideas, but there's very little specifically on sports. So I may come around and ask people their thoughts about the business case, apart from what is for us to make the easier case for people who think about it in right thinking. Kate, I want to come over to you, back to the bubble to some extent again. But I'll read this. This is from the NBA's 2020 handbook. A central goal of the season will be to use the NBA's platform to bring attention and sustained action to issues of social injustice, including combating systemic racism, expanding educational and economic opportunities across the Black community, enacting meaningful police and criminal justice reform, and promoting greater civic engagement. So you mentioned that you've got clients who are in the bubble, out of the bubble now. Giannis is one of them. How have they reacted to things like the Black Lives Matter logo on the floor, that sort of thing? How have they reacted? What kinds of insight can you give us as to the receptivity by players of this standard set forth by the league? And you're muted.
Sorry, now I'm not.
I want to hear you.
Yeah. I think one of the things we saw before even the bubble started and players reported for the bubble was their desire not to lose their voice just to go play basketball. I think we are seeing very clearly a lot of athletes, and for me in the NBA, the situation we have at hand is bigger than basketball. And we're seeing our players own that. We're seeing at Octagon, our talent own that moment and really use it to share their voice and their opinion, draw attention, and bring to light things that, outside of playing games every other night and chasing a championship, they're not getting lost in the noise of what they're trying to do for their job, but what they're trying to do for themselves, their family, this nation, the world. And we've seen really well the NBPA and the NBA work very, very closely together. I mean, they are on site in the bubble, having daily conversations with teams. You mentioned that earlier, that, the Raptors are having team meetings. Every team in the bubble is having daily meetings about how everybody feels. It's an open space for open conversations, but it's also a place for them to say, what can we do? What do we want to do? How do we do it? And collectively come together. And I think that's one thing you saw the NBA and the NBPA agree on, people being able to pick something to put on the back of their jerseys other than their last name. And that was empowering, I think, to players to feel that they finally had been heard, but they were part of changing a conversation outside of just playing basketball. And, they range from Black Lives Matter to vote to say their name. It kind of became a personal choice in a non-personal setting, which is a professional setting. So it allowed them to see that. And I think that's important for us, for them to feel like they are heard through their employer and through the world, but they're also able to help other people feel like they can say messaging from them through the talent and the platform that they each have. So it's been really good for them. I think it's been a great collaboration between the players, the league, the NBPA, but also the teams. I mean, as we all know, everyone's going for one thing, which is a championship. So to see them kind of unite in a playoff setting and have teams have joint meetings really shows you the maturity and thought that goes behind each decision that's made inside the bubble and outside the bubble.
And just uniquely, there got to be some players who don't want to participate and engage in these activities. I mean, from the ranging from I'm a person that just has to focus on my game. I can't do anything else to people that, their politics are just not down with these kinds of activities. Have you had any of those conversations?
We have players obviously that are rookies and some that are, 12, 13 years in the league. So every conversation is an ebb and flow to have our players feel supported. I think we're hearing that from a lot of the staff at ASU is saying you want to make sure your players and your students and everybody in an organization feel heard, but also supported. And that's the best thing that we can do from an agent side is make sure that we encourage, support, empower, but allow each of them to react and digest and reflect differently. There is no one way is the right way or the wrong way. Everybody processes things different, and knowing your athlete and helping them not get kind of lost in what society says they should or shouldn't do is our top priority, to make sure that they each get to reflect and respond as they want to, but also that they have the support of us.
Thank you, Kate. Jerry, let's go to you and talk about StockX and some of the kinds of involvement that your company has. I mean, interestingly, right, we've talked a lot about athletes and kind of the engagement they can have in this moment. But what about a corporate entity? What kind of philanthropic activities have you found yourself newly engaged in, and what kind of impact are you seeing them have?
Yeah, I think from overall, just kind of landscape-wise, from a brand perspective, just across the board, you've seen so much kind of awareness and so many CEOs speaking out about what they're doing for diversity and inclusion and support Black Lives Matter, and and while that's good, it can't just stop at a conversation. It can't just stop at like, hey, we're going to support, we're going to donate, and that's it. And I think that's one of the things I'm happy about with StockX is we had 40% of our staff are people of color, 25% of our leadership are people of color. And when we had that conversation that I spoke of earlier, it brought up some real opportunities to continue to grow and strengthen within the area. And we outlined 6 areas where we want to kind of put dedicated strategies and focuses to kind of help our growth there. One being workforce diversity, another one being inclusion, third being equal opportunity, fourth being really advancing a lot of our frontline workers, fifth kind of a community engagement, and sixth marketplace diversity. And I think the important thing here is not just to have these as working sessions and things people talk about, but have plans that are going to go 12, 18, 24 months down the line where we're still kind of hitting these benchmarks and having us be accountable for the things that we're saying that we're going to do. So having that dedicated focus has been something that's really been great to see, and kind of an exciting opportunity for us to continue to grow and strengthen in the area.
Thanks, Jerry. Kim, as we said, this is Rise's business in some sense. So why don't you talk some about the actual engagement that your organization has had, some of the impact that you've seen, and even some of the things that may be coming up. And I'm also curious too, if it fits in. You did mention the transition to virtual. Mm-hmm. That impacted the mission too.
Yeah, so I would say, particularly after the murder of George Floyd here, we were getting many more organizations saying, hey, we want to have a conversation with our entire team. And so I would say for a lot of what we're doing right now is having our work extend beyond just the diversity and inclusion committee. And that's where I think oftentimes we would intersect prior to that. Now we're in conversations with the CEOs, the presidents, they're being a part of these dialogues, being part of the conversation. So when I think about even how our work has changed, and I talked about the demand increasing so much, I think we have different people that are at the table now, who are showing up for, and Ken, you're familiar with kind of some of the educational work that we do. We do a lot when it comes to skill building. So we really think about it. So how are we helping people to, work on perspective taking, conflict resolution, communicating effectively, and doing that in a very experiential way. And I think oftentimes, right, you're not seeing leaders saying like, I have the time for this. Now leaders are realizing like, I must make time for this. I have to set the example. I need to be at the table. I won't mention which team this was, but for one of the conversations that I was leading, the CEO broke down in tears. It was a white male who we know in many of our teams and leagues that across a number of organizations, that person is a white male. So we were seeing a different level of vulnerability in addition to just even being at the table. So that is a good switch to see in our work of who's actually showing up. I think more so we are, as an organization, challenging people to go beyond the statements. I think seeing what people have done when it comes to statements or things on their t-shirts and arenas, et cetera, like all of those things, we're saying that is important. Like you need to have the public's attention of all of that. But we also want to know, what are you doing beyond that? How are you reevaluating your organization? Jerry, you're talking about like the stats for your organization when it comes to people of color, spending some time in that work. So that's been another big part of it. I had mentioned earlier in my remarks of like taking this like anti-racist approach and helping people realize that doesn't mean like one day you're done. You can't say that you gave people election day off so that nobody was prohibited from voting and like, look at me, that's it. But it is day in and day out work that includes everyone. So those are like a few of the things that have been coming to mind of what's changed. I also would say we do a climate survey. We talk about measurement. I know you kind of brought that up of like thinking about our impact. And I think more organizations are being less afraid to say, I truly do want to hear from all of my employees, not just the ones that showed up for the focus group, but a confidential survey that allows us to compare one point of time to another of how people are feeling from a national standpoint, but then looking at their organization, their manager, et cetera. So we do a whole like host of surveys for our programs where I think we've seen some of the greatest impact is at the collegiate and our younger student athletes, our high school level, where people are literally saying, I didn't know how to approach this conversation before. Now, after I've been in this discussion with Rise about microaggressions or the difference between interpersonal racism and systemic racism, like I actually feel like I have the confidence to address things. And so we think that's really important as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, and you sort of answered a great Harvard Business Review article that I read a while back that talks about the worst thing about unconscious bias training is that it gets white men's hair standing up on the back of their necks even more because, why do I have to do this? I'm a good person. Why do I have to do this? And I think a lot of people are learning in this moment that there's a better way to go at this, and some of the formalities of having these conversations of having, jelly beans and kind of all these different things people have done over the years have been kind of pushed to the side with my academic partners, and more people realize it's more of what's needed. It's just discussion. That if we can just have discussion, I think, and I'm going to ask everybody to kind of suggest how students might continue to look at this issue some more on their own, and readings you might suggest or otherwise. I'll lead off with some thoughts. I mean, Kim has mentioned a couple times, and I think many people have probably heard in passing about the need to be anti-racist, and many people haven't read Kendi's book yet on being an anti-racist. It is worth the read to understand how it's not enough to say I'm not racist, and how difficult it is to be an anti-racist, and how willing you have to be to accept that it's a journey, and that most of us, including me, remain racist in many ways. That wherever you're from, these biases exist. The key and the transition comes, again, as everybody has said, when you have conversations and engage and express your racism, and everybody that's worked with organizations in the way that Kim's talking and that Jerry did internally, and that Ray's done it with people, and Tyrone does roaming around, and Kate has done with players, know the success has come where the conversations have come, and the more intimate those conversations are, the more open people are, the more you can get to the point to say, yeah, I'm a racist, but here's anti-racist stuff I'm doing, and I know to say I'm not racist is inaction. I mean, it's the Bishop Desmond Tutu kind of statement. If people point to Angela Davis and Kendi and all this kind of people, but Tutu during the anti-apartheid period said, look, if you're not against the oppressor, you're down with the oppressor. I mean, it's the harsher language to say, but you can't be in between. You have to take some stand in some kind of way. So that's it. So Kendi's book, and there's actually a great book now. One of my favorite authors for people to say, how did this happen in our country? How did we get here? Isabel Wilkerson's new book, Caste, is like a great look at not just the differences amongst races in America, but how it's happened around the world, how race was a construct that was created. And the other, her earlier Pulitzer Prize winning book, The Warmth of Other Suns, is just a great book to understand Ray and my parents' generation, how they migrated from the South and why they did that. And without doing the classroom spoiler alert that I sometimes do, I mean, the striking thing about that book, and why was it this mass migration from this place with all these terrible things were happening in the South? She says that sometimes the best form of protest is just to leave, is just to move on. So it's really striking so you think about, this is a 600-page book. I'm giving you kind of one line out of it, but it's really something to think about in terms of what should you do in this moment. But what else does anybody else recommend that students do in this moment? Think about, maybe, read.
And I'll chime in here.
Yeah,
I think the best lesson we had with our student athletes very quickly was along the lines of what Kim said, and that was to educate in what you just said. And we had a very frank conversation with all of our student athletes, all of our coaches. It was via Zoom, but we had almost 100% participation. And the message was, you're either racist or you're anti-racist. There's no more bystander activity. There's no more remaining silent, and by your silence essentially condoning. You got to step up and start taking action that is anti-racist. Otherwise, you step aside and don't get in the way of the progress we're trying to make. And that was the education part of it. I was astounded, and maybe I shouldn't have been, how a lot of people really didn't appreciate what Juneteenth stood for, or that Tulsa, where they were going to have the rally for the president, was a place of one of the most horrific massacres of Black people in this country. That people really didn't appreciate that. So for us, it became very clear the educational opportunity that this time presented. You really had to drive home the education. You're either racist or you're anti-racist, and then really educate about some of the history that, very frankly, a lot of our folks, including folks who look like me and you, really didn't seem to have grasped. And so the education opportunity here has really been quite astounding. And we'll continue to focus on that.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that. One of the other big things for this time, at least for me, is to continue to have the dialogue. And when you're having that dialogue, really listen to the other stories that people have been through. I know for me, like a lot of, like my whole kind of community has some very personal stories that when you hear it, you realize like this isn't something that you're just seeing on the news. This is something that's happening every day to the people that are right next to you. I remember driving to school one day, and I remember it was in the suburbs, and looking on a stop sign, and it said, white supremacy is the only remedy. And that was on my way to school, in high school. And so like, this isn't something that's just coming up now. This is something that has been there and that we've all been dealing with. And it's not just the stories that you're seeing on the news. And so learning those stories, hearing what people have been through, continue to have that dialogue. But when you have that dialogue, listening to what's also happening, it's something I think is going to be really key to kind of keep this conversation going and the momentum going.
Yeah, I've told people that's my, I don't know, big fear is probably the wrong phrasing, but the further you get away from George Floyd, the less activity, and then we have this other moment that occurs. So there is this unfortunate reinvigoration that occurs. One thing I want to add to what Ray was saying about this racist or anti-racist moment. It does, again, pandemic moment of reflection. You can say the same thing about gender discrimination, same thing about supporting LGBTQ communities. You know, sort of all this stuff about where were you in this moment? What did you do in this moment? And if you haven't decided that I'm gonna be an advocate to support these various groups, these efforts, rather than, well, you know, I'm not bad, I'm not doing anything, you know, in this moment, there's too much going on to sit by the side and not do anything. Other things.
Related to that,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to share to all the students to keep in mind is, and I think you're saying like what you do in this moment is just like you're doing with everything else, like set some goals for yourself, right? It is your goal to have a conversation with that uncle that, you know, maybe has some different points of views, right? And like, that's typically what we avoid, right? So like set some goals of things that make you uncomfortable. Set a goal to make sure that you talk to 5 of your friends, making sure they're registered to vote, right? Like set some goals for yourself. You think about, you know, the fall, the rest of the year. It's just so critical to do that. And then, you know, check them off, have somebody that's holding you accountable because you want to be able to say like, hey, what did I do in this moment of time? Ken, as you were saying, and if you're not intentional about it, time just going to slip away from you. And, you know, before we know it, like the next thing will have happened. And what are you doing to actively dismantle, you know, the things that are problematic from a system standpoint in our society, but, you know, starting at home, starting with your friends, things along those lines too.
There's a, and then Kate, I'll let you jump in, but there's a crazy story on my part from you know, personal reflection in this moment, Kim. I think which is so important to think about where you are on things and things that again, with my PTSD that still anger you. I was you know, in social media, somebody posted I was a horrible offensive lineman at Stanford, and there was this picture that was taken by all the offensive linemen that was given to our coach, and it was, you know, kind of a goofy picture of, you know, guys smoking cigarettes and standing around it kind of crazily. But I mean, in that moment, when they gave it to the coach at this banquet, I said, well, those guys didn't even invite me, you know, and I of course was the only Black guy on the offensive line. And so I reached to one of the guys in the picture, because it just came up, oh, this was the greatest time of our life. And I said, what happened to me? I mean, in all these years, I haven't said anything to them. And we had a, you know, really engaged conversation about that and what was happening at the time. And as Ray was on the team too, there were, you know, maybe 10 of us out of a, you know, 80-man roster. So, you know, it was very difficult time, but it's those kinds of things. And to, you know, in my relationship with, you know, some of those guys improves in the moment by virtue of having this literally 40-year-old conversation that never took place about what was going on then. So, Kate.
I was just going to jump in real quick and then I got to jump off, unfortunately.
Sure.
But I think, you know, everyone keeps talking about conversations and accountability. And I think from a student perspective and everyone, you know, there's always conversations to start them earlier. And I mean, I have 3 young children, and these are things I want to talk to them about now so that they are aware and educated. And you have the opportunity to inspire, change, or educate someone much younger than yourself that you might not even realize in your family that you work with, even someone older. There's an All-Star, an NBA All-Star had one of the best lines that's kind of sat with me that I think everyone can reflect upon. And it says, you have my ears and you have my voice. And I don't think that's applicable to just celebrities and talent. I think that's applicable to every single person, because we all have friends, family, neighbors, just everyday people that we know that have experienced some type of negative experience that we can listen to, let them be vulnerable. We can let ourselves be vulnerable, and then go out in the world and make change and instill change. So I think the more we allow ourselves to do that, the better off we're all going to start to see things.
Thank you, Kate. I know you got to run, and we see this news that the.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. The Bucks still haven't come out onto the court for Game 6 with Orlando, and there's been some discussion within the Bucks about a boycott. Sources tell the reporting people. So NBA officials have gone into the Milwaukee locker room. So So that kind of thing is happening real time. I guess the one last specific question, then any general comments people have, and any thoughts certainly too on the business case. Why is it good business in sports to be supportive of these issues, is guidance to these students on getting jobs in this moment. I mean, in this difficult time. Any insights on what they should do, which somewhat in my mind is not too different what you should do in general. But why don't we start off with whoever wants to jump in first on that?
Yeah, I'll start, Ken. I mean, you look at it in terms of the industry as a whole right now. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Just when you look at sports, baseball, and look at all the sports across the board, I think for those students that are trying to make their way into the industry, really probably the first question you're going to get asked is, what did you do during the course of the pandemic to better yourself? And that's where each individual should really make it a point to really assess where they are, look at their skill sets, look at what things they really want to accomplish. Have they gone about continuing to network and connect with people, take advantage of people being available from a virtual format to get a hold of people. Informational interviews are a great avenue to go down that road to talk to individuals. So just keep looking at how you continue to build your skill set, understand, continue to educate yourself in terms of what positions are out there. And then at some point, even if the job opportunity you may be looking for is not really there at the moment, maybe it's something where you create your own actual internship for yourself. That something you do on your own, maybe it's your own research or your own project, as a way to still show something tangible that you can then at that point have when that time does come, when you are in front of somebody. Because that's just a true reality of what we're dealing with. Our hiring season for us in baseball is going to be getting started again coming. So in the next couple of months, our teams, we're hoping they're going to be re-engaging. Also take it for those that are interested, specifically getting into baseball. I have a network that's on LinkedIn I created 11 years ago. It's called the Baseball Industry Network. And it has over 36,000 members in it. So it's a great way to just be reaching out, connecting with people, but also there's just a lot of information that's out there as a resource to help individuals. So just want to encourage individuals to keep putting themselves out there. Don't be afraid. Keep looking at ways how they can get better each and every day.
Any additional thoughts on what students can do in this moment to chase down those jobs? I think the volunteering internship and frankly, being able to do a virtual internship now can make life a lot easier if you can structure something. I always say, make it as easy as you can on the person you're asking. Say, hey, here's what I can do for you for the next 2 weeks. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would say on the networking side, after you met with that person, figure out a way you can reach out in a way that adds value. I mean, you guys are on the pulse of like what's cool, what's next, what's hot. And from the brand side of things, that's some of the things I'm looking for. And so when after our meeting, if you reach out, Jerry, I saw this awesome study, Jerry, I saw this trend happening, I'm going to remember you because you're educating me on something new that's happening. And the thing in the second part, I had an old manager that used to say, in God we trust, everyone else bring your data. And so that data and analytics side of things, if you can, that's where so many trends are going. So if you're educating yourself, also look at educating yourself in that way. Look at the trends, look at what's happening, look at the new technologies that are coming out, and figure out ways to utilize and become skilled in those ways. Because I can speak personally, that's something I'm looking for when looking at interns and just different opportunities.
Any final thoughts overall?
I'll share one thing that I put in the chat is that on the digital learning series, for those that are looking for other ways to learn new things, see student athletes take part of conversations in addition to pro athletes, check out that. I think it's been really inspiring to see student athletes say, yes, I'm willing to have conversations about bias, and I'll be recorded and on your website doing that. So, consider those types of things too. Where are you willing to be the leader in those uncomfortable conversations in a more public way that can inspire others too?
All right, let me ask Sam and/or Elise to come back up. I want to thank the panelists for all the great insights. And definitely, as Jerry recommended, I mean, if you want to reach the panelists, best to reach with content and purpose. But I know everybody on this call is available in any kind of meaningful way they can be helpful. But thank you to all the panelists. Elise?
Yeah, that's the conclusion of our panel. I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists and our moderator for taking the time out of your day to be here with us and share all of that knowledge. Other than that, I don't think we have much more. So with that, I think we are done. Thank you guys so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank
do
you.
the old Zoom wave from everybody.
Yes. Good luck to all of you.
Yeah.